One point I know when we talked a lot of Pete Rose about a month ago, or a couple weeks ago, when when he had passed away, one thing that constantly got brought up, of course, was the lifetime ban from baseball, not being in the Hall of Fame. And the one thing, Elliot, that I know you continue to bring up all the time was just the hypocrisy of baseball. It's not a good look. You continue to keep him out of baseball, continue to keep him out of the Hall of Fame because he bet on baseball, all while telling fans, go watch baseball and the FanDuel parlay before each game. Now we're going to most likely be watching Reds games on FanDuel TV.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy is something that a lot of fans bring up, including you.
I just think that I think that a sport that's so famously against sports gambling, and let's be clear, against gambling on baseball, I think to have so many sportsbook sponsor games, to have a parlay about your team every single night sponsored on the show, it's just strange to me. And that's the world we live in. It's a gambling world. Sports gambling is picked. It's never been more involved in our culture than it is right now. And yet at the same time, if you gamble on baseball, if you gamble on the sport you're playing, these players are terminated. They're gone. They're wiped. Whatever the NBA guy was last year,
Jonte Porter.
And again, it just leaves the door open, in my opinion, for something that you don't want. It leaves that door open for tanking or for intentionally throwing games. I think that door is set open once you allow that sports books can be everywhere. LeBron's in a DraftKings commercial, but not for basketball. It's just for NFL. It's just strange to me. It's just a strange thing. And I get it. It's a very simple rule. Don't bet on your sport and you're fine. Don't bet on your sport and you're fine. But eventually I feel like those lines get crossed and guys will do whatever they want. Because gambling's okay. Gambling's okay. Look, our outfield wall. 6 different sports books out there. So it's just a strange thing to me.
I've never looked at it as being that hypocritical, only because, and I've already seen it in the chat, and let me go make sure I give credit where credit's due. I know some of these are moving up, but it was something about the players aren't allowed to drink, but yet there's alcohol banners all over the place, and that's what I've always said too about this. I don't think it's hypocritical at all. I think that it's a simple rule. It's not that they tell the players you're not allowed to gamble. You're just not allowed to gamble on baseball, and I think that's an okay ask of Major League Baseball. I think that's an okay, fair ask of the NBA, the NFL. I don't think it's that crazy for them to look at their athletes and say, hey, you don't need to bet on the sport you play in when you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of ways that can basically taint the integrity of the game. And we've seen that happen. I mean, right away, we didn't give Pete the benefit of the doubt that he bet on his team to win. We just said, "Oh, what were you messing with lineups? Were you only betting on the Reds to win?" Now he swears that he did during that stretch, of course, and many people have believe him at this time. But bottom line is he bet on baseball. And we bring this up because, for instance, there's a lot of alcohol advertisements throughout the NBA, throughout the NFL, throughout Major League Baseball. And players aren't allowed to have a Bud Light sitting on the bench, or during a timeout, instead of a Gatorade bottle, they're there chugging a shotgun and a beer or whatever. Oh, wait, NBA, you're going to get mad at me for drinking a beer? Look at all this Bud Light, banners you have all over the place. I think it's hypocritical. That's how I view it with this, although I do understand how uncomfortable it makes people because baseball is different than the others because it's bad, but gambling is bad. And that's how they've kept Pete Rose out, but now they're as much in bed with it as any other sport out there. So I definitely understand where people are coming from when they say it's hypocritical. I just don't view it as that because it's not like they're saying you can't bet on sports. They're saying you can't bet on baseball. I think that's a fair ask considering the money that these players make and the chance to be a professional athlete. But I get both sides, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to side a little bit more with you in terms of the hypocrisy aspect of it, but I do think with the current players and with the Pete Rose discussion, I think it's 2 different things. Mm-hmm. I think once you start doing the partnerships, and I mean, we're airing Reds games on FanDuel Sportsbook now.
Yeah.
I think at that point, we need to look at the guys like Pete Rose a little differently. But I 100% agree with you. Just because you're sponsored by FanDuel and DraftKings and Caesars and MGM and all those, there's no reason that means baseball players should be allowed to gamble on baseball. And that also doesn't, just because baseball players aren't allowed to gamble on baseball, doesn't mean that I don't think the MLB should be able to partner with sports books. Like, I think those two things are very different. I definitely agree with you there. But I do think all of these sportsbook partnerships and how they keep progressing and getting bigger and bigger and more influence in the game does go back to the Pete Rose conversation of how are you keeping a guy out for gambling on baseball when you are promoting gambling on baseball. And the other thing with the Pete Rose conversation that I think always gets lost in the shuffle is he only gambled on it as a manager. Why aren't we just putting him in as the player?
Yeah.
That's two different things. We see players put in as just managers and managers put in as just players and all that stuff all the time across all sports. Keep the manager, Pete Rose, out for gambling on baseball if you'd like to do that, but the player belongs.
It's for me, it's one of those things that, like, Pete Rose will have some sort of tribute on opening day. There'll be some sort of Pete Rose tribute that will be broadcast, and if that broadcast is live streamed on FanDuel Sportsbook, I think that's a strange look.
I agree.
I just think it's weird to me, and I think it's a little bit hypocritical. I do. I get the whole point. There's beer sponsors. You can't get drunk while playing baseball. There's gambling sponsors. You can't gamble on baseball while playing baseball. I get it. I understand it. But baseball is historically against baseball, gambling on baseball. But yet, the promotion of every other fan to do it, it's a little bit different. It's strange to me. So I did think the point of this, by the way, I did see him say that he's going to try to get rid of the prop baseball gambling. I don't know if you saw that.
Who said that?
Brad Manfred on this interview.
Yep.
Said that he's going to try to get rid of betting on player props. So I think if you start to go that way, it'll be wild. But I think it's probably the best.
No, not me. Don't get rid of player props.
Well, we've seen that start already.
The
NBA.
Did they do that?
The NBA has done away with unders for any player on a 10-day or two-way contract.
Yeah.
So any player that's not on a full NBA contract, you can no longer bet their unders. So that's at least a start of, we've already seen it with college, but they framed that as they're not professional athletes. You shouldn't be able to put the onus on one player because they hate DMs and everything like that for an 18.
Which I agree with.
100%. I think it is a different conversation because I don't think that applies at all to professional athletes.
Yeah.
I think the only conversation that should be involved with prop betting on professional sports is whether or not it can affect the outcome of the game and the integrity of the sport. If we think it does, then we should do away with prop betting.
Yep.
It's pretty point blank, I think. If there's any statistics that say that prop betting swings the win-loss and outcome of games and integrity of the sport, it should be gone. And I'm a huge prop better. I love prop betting.
Yep.
We sit here and stream Reds games. We prop bet every at-bat.
Every single
It's
at-bat.
the most fun thing in the world. But if it's going to, change pro sports to be more of a movie or TV show than actual sports where you don't know who's going to win and you don't know what's going to happen, then I think getting away with it would not be the worst thing.
Yeah, you see it in the NFL where some players are cognizant of some of the prop bets.
Yeah.
You'll
Antonio
have
Pierce.
Yes.
Down 8 this weekend, kicks a field goal, down 8 with 2 minutes left.
Yep.
Covers the spread.
And some players will let it slip that, hey, I was aware
Yeah.
of what the touchdown total was or the anytime touchdown score. And some, when the game's out of reach, they'll just run out of bounds as opposed to run it into the end zone, which is wild.
Yeah.
That's how much they want to stick it to fans is that aspect of it. But so Rob Manfred was on the Dan Patrick show. Dan Patrick said, hey, well, while I have you here, what do I say to the Elliots of the world? What do I say to the fans of the world that find it very hypocritical of Rob Manfred of Major League Baseball to continue to push the sports gambling initiative across the board, but also kept Pete Rose out of baseball from '89 on, and of course kept him out of the Hall of Fame because he did what baseball's big initiative is now pushing, which is gambling, sports gambling, betting on baseball. Here's what Rob Manfred had to say in response to Dan Patrick.
Oh, boo.
Oh, Rubens.
Oh, boo.
We're buffering.
Cincy.
This is unfortunate.
We're buffering.
We're buffering. Well, I mean, how long does it normally take to buffer?
I feel like it's a long buffer.
Oh, my goodness.
And we're back.
And we're And so Rob Manfred was on the Dan Patrick show. He was asked, of course, about what do you say to fans who find it very hypocritical that you kept Pete Rose out of baseball once he was caught gambling on baseball, but yet continue to push all these sports gambling initiatives across Major League Baseball? Here's what Rob Manfred had to say, Major League Baseball commissioner. I promise it was a doozy, folks. I promise it was a doozy, nonetheless. But it's all right. We'll try to get that fixed, nonetheless. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version as we try to get that addressed. Basically, going on to say, baseball is a privilege. Playing baseball is a privilege.
Yeah.
And that basically also going on to say that, hey, we didn't ask you not to gamble, or we didn't ask you not to gamble on all sports across the board. We just asked you not to gamble on baseball. And he thinks that's a fair request, and that playing Major League Baseball is a privilege and nonetheless. So you got it fixed, Case? We're good?
Yeah.
I think we're good.
I think we're good.
All right, let's try this one more time. Rob Manfred asked about, is it hypocritical to push all these sports gambling initiatives all while keeping Pete Rose out of baseball and the Hall of Fame since he was found to have betted on baseball back in 1989? Here's Rob Manfred on the Dan Patrick Show.
All right, I want you to answer this so I don't have to answer it anymore. When my audience says, yeah, but baseball is in bed with gambling, and so aren't they being hypocritical with Pete Rose?
Yeah, here's how I think about that. I think it's a privilege to work in Major League Baseball and to be a Major League Baseball player. Often, when you have a privilege, it comes with obligations. The obligation in this case is to stay away from gambling because involvement with gambling by people who work in the game and can influence outcomes reflects and presents a threat to the integrity of the game. So that's a category of people. Fans are different. The government, in this case, the Supreme Court, paved the way for legalization of sports betting. Fans want to engage with the game in that way. They present no threat to the integrity of the game or a minimal threat to the integrity of the game. And as a result, we have different rules that apply to those fans and have taken advantage of that business opportunity. I don't see any inconsistency between those two rules. I really don't.
Whether you agree with Rob Manfred or not, I did like the answer. I thought he explained that a lot more eloquently than I did, and most people do. I know people get, into heated debates about this. There's nothing heated about our debate or conversation with this. I actually didn't mind his response. A lot of times these commissioners will kind of tiptoe around stuff. He didn't tiptoe around it. He had a perfect answer and response for it. We don't have to like it, but at least he had a justifiable reason for why they're sticking to it. And I still agree with him more so on my side than your guys is about that. But at the end of the day, Pete Rose, it's not just about Pete Rose, but there's going to be so many scenarios moving forward where we're going to call out the hypocrisy of baseball as players continue to get busted for this, including Porter, who you talked about of the NBA, a no-name player, and it's easy to make an example out of a no-name player, but my goodness, every player in baseball that goes to maybe break the rule and gamble, and if they did that to Pete Rose was one of the biggest names in all of baseball, even 30, 40 years later, still one of the biggest names in all of baseball, and they made an example out of him. As much as baseball drives me crazy and as much as I can't stand that about it, at least it stuck to his guns. I do respect sports at times, or really anybody or any entity that sticks to its guns and doesn't just all of a sudden cave to fans and the pressure around it. To Major League Baseball's credit, whether you like it or not, they at least stick to what they believe, and they've done so for decades.
A lot of the reason, too, why Pete isn't in is because he never really owned up to it.
Right.
And he never really apologized. So that's the most important part of all this when you're talking about Pete. There was such a denial for so long. I would never gamble on the Reds. I would never gamble on the Reds. I would never gamble on the Reds to lose. I would never gamble on my team to lose games. I wanted to win. And I do kind of believe that. He had that mentality where the winning games was so fun, was so important to him. The sport of baseball was so important to him. But I do think that there are lines that are crossed, and once you open this sports book stuff, and it has been opened, once you have a direct support line for sports gambling, for gambling on baseball, but also telling everybody we're so against it, I just think those waters get muddied, and I get why people think they're not muddied at all. But for me personally, as I gamble on every baseball game I can, and I see every outfield billboard covered with a sports book, I think it's strange to be, you know what, if you gamble on our sport, you're done. You're out. You're out of the league. No second chances here. You're done. It's over.
There
It's
you
just
go.
two sides, two-faced for me.